into the book. Why did you decide to write it?
Two reasons. The atrocities of October 7th, 2023 are a type of atrocity that we have seen elsewhere in the West, in the Manchester Arena bombing, the Ariana Grande bombing, the Bataclan massacre in Paris, the Pulse nightclub attack in Orlando, Florida. But this was on a scale far, far beyond them even. This was 1,200 people massacred in a morning, including at a dance party in the sun.
So I want to say, if you look at the ratio of how many people would have been killed were this America, comparing the population sizes, in America, the scale of this attack would have been equivalent to like 700,000 people. When I was in Israel meeting with people, I was told every time October 7th came up, every single person in this country knows somebody who was killed or was taken hostage, whether it was at the Nova Music Festival or it was in one of the kibbutzim or wherever. Everybody knows somebody, which is insane. Imagine if everyone in America knew somebody who was killed in 9/11. I don't know anyone who was killed in 9/11. I don't know anyone who was almost killed in 9/11. I don't know anybody who was supposed to be in the building that day, right? But everybody knows somebody who was supposed to be at the music festival, who was at the music festival, who was shot at, who was killed, who was taken hostage, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone knows somebody. And everybody knows somebody who's dead or taken hostage, which is so sad.
South of Israel, by jihadists, Hamas, who committed crimes so appalling I can't describe some of them on air. They also kidnapped 250 Israelis from their homes. I noticed very early in this that two things would happen. One was there was a great risk that the actual crimes, the atrocities, were not going to be documented enough. The world was going to pass over them and talk about Israel's military response to get back the hostages and to kill the leadership of Hamas. I wanted to go, and I did go straight away to speak to the survivors, the families, the wounded, people in the hospitals, and much more, and try to make sure that I had as good a sense of the day as it's possible to get. Second thing was that I was embedded with the IDF in Gaza and Lebanon and Israel and elsewhere to make sure that I saw firsthand, and I recount in the book, how the IDF responded to this atrocity. But the third thing, which was on my mind from October the 8th, was what has gone wrong in the rest of the West? What has gone wrong in the UK? That, as we know, the Telegraph splashed the story a few weeks ago. On the day of October the 7th, so-called pro-Palestinian groups, who are actually just anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, organized demonstrations for that night and the night after.
Coincidentally, on October 7th. They say that they're protesting to support resistance, or they're protesting the Israeli government's actions in Gaza. But why are you protesting now as opposed to 3 weeks ago? You're protesting now, the day after an absolute slaughter of Israelis, of Jewish people. That's the day that you're protesting. What are you protesting? You're showing support for the slaughter of innocent civilians, 1,200 people, 1,000 of them civilians.
In what other world are 1,200 people burned alive in their homes, raped and beheaded, and people in our society immediately decide to victimize the victims?
Yes.
And a lot of people will tell you, no, this didn't happen. Nobody was beheaded. Nobody was burned alive. It's not true. I am telling you, I have been to southern Israel. I have been to the Gaza envelope post-October 7th. I have stood in the exact spot where they lost their lives. I have stood in the burned out buildings where elderly couples died of either burning alive or smoke inhalation in their safe rooms. I've stood in the exact spot where an 80-year-old woman was shot 9 times in a concrete bomb shelter by Hamas operatives. I've seen the bullet holes in the wall where she stood. I've seen leftovers of blood spatter on those walls. It is disgusting.
And this is the question I ask in the book, among other things.
I've also seen the videos of, I haven't seen videos of civilians being beheaded. I've seen attempts of civilians to be beheaded. Like in Re'im, there was these Thai workers. They were immigrant workers that worked in the kibbutz. Okay, I've seen videos where Hamas operatives attempt to behead these Thai workers with a garden hoe. But I have seen videos where an IDF soldier is killed, his head is lifted up, and then they take his head off with a knife, and not even a big knife, like a, I don't know, maybe a 5-inch folding knife. Just And I'm telling you, you have not seen horrific until you've seen, I'm not even going to say it. Like, I'm not even going to describe it because I don't know if it's TOS.
Is what has gone wrong here that we have, from days after October the 7th, hundreds of thousands of people on our streets celebrating the death cult of Hamas, not siding with a democracy like Israel, an ally of ours that makes mistakes like all allies do, but not siding with our allies, but siding with the death cult.
The death cult that wants you killed. Death to America and death to Israel, they shout.
This is an enormous civilizational challenge to us in Britain, in America, in the rest of the West. And until we grasp the obscenity of what has happened on our streets in the last 18 months, what has been happening in our mosques, in our streets, we will not address this problem. And the problem that Israel has stared in the face of will happen here as well.
Well, what is to blame for this figure? A poll last year of British Muslims taken by the Henry Jackson Society found that only 25% believed that rapes or murders had actually taken place.
I am telling you, this came up in the Hassan and Ethan debate, which I watched yesterday, and I'm going to react to it on the channel. It's very interesting. Hassan Piker also denies that any rapes happened on October 7th, and I am telling you, I have seen the evidence of sexual violence on October 7th. I watched the 47-minute Bear Witness film. I was invited as a journalist to view the film so that I could report on it, and I am telling you, I have seen with my own eyes the sexual violence. I have seen sexual violence on October 7th on an industrial scale, and not just against adults, against children, okay? I don't know if I can describe it here because I don't know if it's TOS. You know what? I'm a journalist. I don't care, okay? I have seen women who were ordered to bend over before they were shot in their rear ends. All you can see is their rear ends up in the air with giant blood spots in a hole in the center. It is one of the most horrifically disgusting and disturbing things I have ever seen in my entire life. And I've seen some pretty fucked up stuff, okay? So to deny that there was sexual violence on October 7th is beyond disgusting. Okay, it was believe all women. It was anytime somebody accuses Donald Trump of sexual violence, he did it automatically right off the bat. But now when you have survivors coming forward and saying, I was raped by Hamas on October 7th. Men and women, by the way. Don't listen to them. They're liars. They're discredited. How are they discredited? Well, they're just liars. Okay? Okay, what about the people who weren't raped but came forward and said, my friend got killed, and while I was playing dead right next to her, I watched a Hamas operative rape her corpse. How about that? Believe all women, believe all survivors until you support the terrorists who did the sexual violence. Now it's deny, deny, deny.
On October the 7th.
It's an utter obscenity, and it points to how many sick people there are in our society. We have had, in the last 10 years, a slogan in the wake of Me Too and so on, believe all women. But it turns out that the rule doesn't apply if the women are Jews. The women are Israelis. I have seen the evidence of this. I have spoken to the people who have gone through this. The victims of rapes on the 7th and people who saw the dead bodies of women who have been raped. The idea that we have such a sick coterie in our country that does not believe raped women because the people who carried out the attacks are Hamas or the people who suffered them are Israelis is, again, a problem in our society here.
And Hassan Piker said this on his debate with Ethan. There was no physical evidence recovered from the bodies, right? And the reason for that is we didn't know that there was sexual violence until survivors came forward. We didn't know that Hamas was raping people because this is like their actual military, right? The Al-Qassam Brigaders, the ones who carried out October 7th, right? You wouldn't expect a military force in general to be raping people while they're carrying out operations. So we didn't know about it, right? So what do? Well, in Jewish faith, it's very important to bury the bodies as quickly as possible to prevent disgracing those bodies, right? So you don't examine them for, you don't run a rape kit on the dead body, right? Because you're not thinking why would the military rape them? Why would This is military, the Al-Qassam brigades. Why would they be carrying out industrial scale rapes? So you don't test all the bodies or run rape kits on them. You bury them as quickly as possible. You examine them. Yep, shot, dead, killed by Hamas. Okay, bury them to avoid disgracing the dead body. Okay.
If this happened with any other group of people.
And by the way, I'd just like to further say, if there was physical material DNA evidence or any other physical proof of rape on October 7th, they would just tell you the Israeli government said it, so we don't believe it. We don't buy it because the Israelis said it happened, right? But they'll be very happy to believe the Gaza Health Ministry's death toll, which is, by the way, just Hamas, when they claim that 50,000 people or whatever have been killed.
If there were thousands or hundreds of thousands of people in the UK who did not believe it when I don't know, let's play it another way around. If a Muslim woman in the UK said she'd been raped by white men, Jess Phillips and everybody else would be all over that. We would know the name of the one case where that had happened, especially if it was for racial and religious reasons. But Jess Phillips and co, they don't care if, first of all, the victims don't suit their victim hierarchy, and secondly, if the perpetrators aren't comfortable for them.
So there may be sinister motivations behind people not believing that Israeli women were raped and tortured before they were murdered on October the 7th. It could be born out of ignorance. It could be because pro-Palestinianism has become a popular cause in our university campuses. It could be a kind of following of a herd mentality.
Or all of the above.
Yeah.
And people, of course, don't forget, a lot of people need to be taught into hatred. You have to be taught into it. We have to ask ourselves, why is this being taught? Why is pro-extremist ideology being pushed in this country? Why are we so far behind tackling it still? Goes back to my point. Look at the number of reports and inquiries. Every time an atrocity happens in the UK, we have another darn report, another inquiry.
Lessons will be learned.
And the lessons never are learned. Unless we grapple with this in Britain today, we will see what Israel suffered again here in the UK.
But isn't propaganda also part of the explanation? You probably have to accept, as I do too, that Israel has lost the war on social media when it comes to informing the public about what's happened. How much of the data out of Gaza do you think is trustworthy? Because it's very difficult. I know you've been very close, but you can't get British journalists in there to verify much.
Well, I've been in there plenty, and other journalists have been, actually. I've been in Gaza with other British journalists.
Okay, so it is possible to get better data than that supplied by the Palestinian health authorities.
That's tricky because, of course, Hamas still runs Gaza. And the BBC and others run the Hamas health ministry figures as if they're legitimate. Undoubtedly, there have been civilian casualties in Gaza. Undoubtedly, Hamas has talked them up.
And by the way, just as of March 25th, Hamas released new numbers for their death toll, and we found that 70% of the deaths were male fighting age. It went from 70% were women and children to now 70% are male fighting age.
But,
per their reporting,
undoubtedly, Hamas started the war. Hamas is losing the war. That means that Hamas fighters are being killed at a very high rate. The Hezbollah and Hamas leadership have been decimated in the last 18 months. But fourthly, yes, because of the nature of which the death cult of Hamas operates, they deliberately, and this cannot be said often enough, they deliberately flout every law of war and make sure that every law of war that the IDF uses is used against them.
They're very, very good at propaganda. And another thing that I'd like to say before we conclude this video is what the hell is up with this new idea that when you are attacked, you are obligated to provide your enemy's people with food? When has that ever been the case, right? If somebody attacks me, right? If somebody, let's make this very simple. If Douglas Murray breaks into my house, he attacks me with a gun. I shoot him first. He's killed. Do I now have an obligation to feed Douglas Murray's family for the rest of my life? No, I don't. Douglas Murray, via his own volition, broke into my home and tried to kill me. I killed him first. Why do I now need to feed his family? I don't. There is no obligation for a force that is under attack, fighting a defensive war, to feed the people whom are attacking them. But Israel does it anyway. They provided 3,000 calories per day per person and shipped in over 200 food trucks per day through the Karim Shalom crossing into Gaza. That was before they cut it off. Because again, why should they be obligated to provide food? It doesn't matter if they provide food anyway, because they had that 3,000 calories per day per person diet. That's what they should have had. But the problem is they ship the food in, Hamas steals it, and they sell it back to the people that are starving so that they have enough money to buy more guns to fight Israel and continue perpetuating the state of starvation that their people are in. It's not Israel's fault. It's Hamas's fault. And if you want to be mad at somebody about anybody starving in Gaza, be mad at Hamas for stealing their food and selling it back to them when they cannot afford it so that they can continue the war that is putting them in this vulnerable position in the first place. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment what you thought of this down below, guys. Join the Discord linked in the description if you enjoy having these conversations and want to debate more. I'll see you there. And that's all I've got for you.